Cove.
I'd like to actually quote here from an article from April 16th, 2000. Free tuition is not a pipe dream. And it was from a contender for the provincial NDP leadership. Free tuition is not a pipe dream, Cole Harbour Eastern Passage MLA Kevin DeVoe said Saturday in Halifax. It's time we started thinking of a post-secondary education as a right, not a privilege. And Mr. DeVoe outlined his plan for free post-secondary education in Nova Scotia to supporters, etc., etc. So I'm just wondering, what's your stance on tuition? Should post-secondary education be free for all students?
I would ask the honourable member to submit the document that she quoted on the table as soon as you're done. Thank you very much, honourable member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I was a little preoccupied. Are you asking for my personal view on this or my government's view? Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Both.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'm not sure that in recent years the NDP have taken a position on this. Certainly my personal view is that many years down the road, I'd love to see post-secondary education as available to as many Nova Scotians as possible. Certain Stats Canada seems to be indicating that approximately 70% of new jobs are going to require some level of post-secondary education. And I think eventually we're going to be in a real world where post-secondary education will have to be a given, just as we're aiming to get as many students graduated from grade 12. So that post-secondary graduation may become the equivalent of grade 12 graduation, and certainly more people could benefit from all ages if tuition fees were lower, and certainly that's the direction we'd like to go in. I know as more and more bursaries and scholarships and upfront grants are available, you know, the question of what role the family plays in supporting students going on to post-secondary education is interesting, because as we reduce the tuition, it almost turns post-secondary education into a universal program. So those are broad social questions that I think Nova Scotians will debate in the years to come, but I don't foresee any immediate change in terms of that question. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Bearing in mind your desire to have the cost of tuition reduced, I'd like to know what your government is doing to work towards reducing the cost.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to start by obviously giving credit to the former government who were responsible for many of these initiatives. And as I've said over and over again during the budget estimates, that the majority of the education budget this fall is the result of their deliberations and their decision making. So I do want to give credit for those achievements to the former Conservative government. They have created the Nova Scotia University Student Bursary Trust, which is expected to approach 72 million. And those bursaries will be distributed to Nova Scotian students studying at Nova Scotia universities beginning in 2008 over the next 3 years. And they will start benefiting out-of-province students studying at Nova Scotia universities in 2010-11.
Order, please. There seems to be a lot of chatter in the chamber tonight, and the honourable members are having trouble hearing the minister. So I would please ask the members to take your chatter outside the chamber so we can conduct government business. The honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, the honourable member may be interested in knowing that there was a one-time bursary of $440 for full-time students and $220 for part-time students issued to Nova Scotian students back in 2006-07 through the Canada-Nova Scotia Student Bursary. Also last year, there was a one-time, in 07-08, there was a one-time $500 tuition reduction issued to lower fees for Nova Scotia students studying in Nova Scotia. So coming into the current situation, the former government established, as I mentioned earlier, the Nova Scotia University Student Bursary Trust. It was approved by Cabinet in March of 2008. The principal amount in the trust at that time, or is actually $65.9 million, and the trustees are the members of the Council of Nova Scotia University Presidents. And the purpose of the trust is to meet the previous Premier's commitment to reduce tuition to the national average by 2010-11. So in 09-10, that will realize $1,022 per Nova Scotian student who's the beneficiary, and in 2010-11, that will increase to $1,283, and it will also, for the first time, benefit the out-of-province students attending Nova Scotia universities to the amount of $261. And as has been discussed in this chamber many times, my own government has brought in a student retention, what do we call it? Rebate?
The tax credit.
Yeah, the tax credit. And we've actually introduced it a year earlier than projected in order to replace the previous government's program. This will create tax benefits to a maximum of $15,000 for university graduates and $7,500 for community college graduates. And whereas it's not a strategy that necessarily will increase access on the front end, it certainly will be a retention strategy and hopefully encourage students from across Canada, but also more especially within Nova Scotia, to remain here or to move here to start their careers and to raise their families in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford, Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I think you slightly misunderstood my question. My question was, what was your government going to do to help students access post-secondary education in Nova Scotia, not what the previous government did? In fact, when I look through your election platform, I can't find anything that committed more money to improve access to education. You cannot say that your graduate tax credit is going to help students access the system. In fact, it should be under labor and workforce development. It's about keeping people here. It's not about opening up the system to people who need it. So my question is, what will your government do to help students access post-secondary education in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of actions. We have reaffirmed the commitment to make sure that university tuition is at the national average by 2010. We supported the decision of the community college system not to increase tuition fees for the community college this year. And we're certainly working very closely with the universities and that was part of the prepayment, to stabilize funding so that lessens the financial pressures on their end to raise university tuitions. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Well, I know that there was some concern expressed about the anxiety that the universities have surrounding their future funding, and that was some of the justification for the MOU. Earlier this summer, when I wrote to you about the infrastructure program and whether universities were going to be able to participate in that, you wrote back to me to say, I want to assure you that it is the intention of the government to ensure that our universities in the Nova Scotia Community College are able to proceed with the projects approved by Industry Canada under the Knowledge Infrastructure Program, and that the required matching funds from the province and the institutions are in place. The exact sources of these funds will be determined as the 2009-10 budget is developed over the next several weeks. So I'm just wondering, what are the exact sources of these funds?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask for some clarification, but first of all, I do have that information for the earlier question, and I'd like to read that into the record. The grants, the special payments are grants to universities, and there's the Knowledge Infrastructure Program of $18,094,000. That's the federal money. The KIP, the Knowledge Infrastructure Program again. Sorry, the provincial, $18,500,000. The NASCAD mortgage of $1.919 million, and scholarships of $18,000 for a total of $38,531,000. So that's information. I just want to clarify on your most immediate question. Are you asking the source of funding that the department is using for its share, or the province is using for its share of the KIP funding, or the total distribution? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'm asking for the provincial share, where that's coming from, where it's going.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The information that I just read into the record with the federal and provincial KIP money, that's where it shows up in the budget? Is that the... Okay, I do have that information as well.
If you'd like to table that, Minister, the only difference is this is 2 years, whereas the federal is the provincial.
Federal is
The federal money is over 2 years, so we can break it off.
Okay. there's a lot of detail here, and I can table this and make sure that the member gets a copy, or I could read it out if she would prefer to have the information directly. Okay, let me table this. I just want to clarify, the federal funding is over 2 years. The Department of Education provincial grant is 1 year, just to clarify that that difference in the final figures. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Now, even with these infrastructure projects, the fact remains that Nova Scotia's universities face an infrastructure deficit amounting to more than $500 million. I'm just wondering what your government is doing to address this particular issue over the long term.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The honourable member is correct. There is a considerable backlog of deferred maintenance, I think approximately $500 million. And the previous government did some one-time catch-up through their Crown Trust. And certainly we're attempting through this budget to provide a provincial contribution to help in the situation, and I'm currently getting some details on that I can share with you very shortly. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we're waiting for that, maybe I could just move on to the graduate tax credit. Now, both the Alliance of Nova Scotia Student Associations and the Canadian Federation of Students have expressed their concern about this tax credit. It's back-end funding, and it does nothing to help those who really need to access post-secondary education. And now, Manitoba and New Brunswick combined have spent approximately $100 million on graduate tax credits, and retention rates stayed the same. There are no appreciable results as a result of this program. My question is, are we in fact, we're going to go ahead with this tax credit, and why would we do that in the face of lack of results in other provinces that have done the same thing?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're going ahead with the graduate retention rebate. In fact, we're starting it a year earlier than we had expected. It is of some interest. I can't begin to count the number of inquiries we've had. In fact, there was a lot of disappointment expressed when initially we thought perhaps we wouldn't be able to start it till next year. While I appreciate the concerns, I've met with one of the university student associations, and I'm meeting with the second one early tomorrow morning. And I certainly will be interested again in hearing their particular point of view. But we have to keep in mind that the graduate retention rebate is one of a number of tools or strategies that our government sees as necessary to help over the long term. And there is some interest by many people in seeing this implemented. And as with any program or initiative in the province, I think every government regularly reviews the impact, and if it's more successful than we anticipate, there may be some additional costs down the road. If it turns out that it's not achieving our purposes, we will certainly revise the rebate and just see what we can do. But it has a purpose, it was a commitment, and we certainly will be going forward with it. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really need to protest the characterization of this program as it being a way to help students access education, because I don't feel it has anything to do with accessing education. What it does, this should be under Labour and Workforce Development. It does not have anything to do with helping students get into the system or stay in the system. It helps them once they're out of the system, once they're working. And so I really feel that it's not in the right place. Earlier on, we talked, yesterday I think it was, that I mentioned that it seemed to me that we had a whole lot of pilot projects all over the place in the P-12 system. And your response to me was, we like to do things on evidence-based projects. We want to know that things work before we expand them. My question is, knowing that there has been no appreciable retention improvement in the 2 provinces that have already tried this program, why would we go ahead if, in fact, there is no evidence that this works?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe I've characterized it as an access support. And in fact, the graduate retention rebate shows up as a budget line in the Department of Finance budget, not the Department of Education budget. Certainly one of the provinces that has piloted this rebate is Manitoba. And I haven't seen all the research, but certainly Manitoba has been very successful in attracting new residents to that province and has shown considerable progress. I'm not sure whether they've analyzed exactly what's pulled them. I'm sure it's been a variety of factors, but it's very encouraging to see that another new Democrat-run province has had such success with bringing in new citizens, and I'll be very interested to see if some of their strategies might work very well in Nova Scotia. Certainly that's a province that we compare ourselves to in terms of population size, and I am optimistic that we will see some positive results from the rebate, but it is not an initiative of the Department of Education. It's something that is being done through the Department of Finance, and it's actually going to be administered by the Canada Revenue Agency. So it's been recognized, that it's a tax rebate and not necessarily something that's going to increase the number of students entering universities in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might point out that during the election campaign, it was listed under education and not any other part of the party platform. It was listed under education. And in fact, while Manitoba may in fact be attracting all kinds of new residents, we don't know if they're new graduates, if they're immigrants, or whatever. So to say that the fact that Manitoba's immigration rate or that they have more people coming into their province is proof, I'm sorry, just doesn't wash. Maybe we'll move on now to student financial aid. The first 20% of a Nova Scotia student loan is a non-repayable grant. Is your government planning to increase this amount?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The honourable member may realize that this is a fairly recent proposal initiated by the former government, and we certainly are still reviewing how effective it has been. That's one of the topics of discussion that I'm having with the various university student associations, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm meeting with another one of the groups early tomorrow morning. So we'll be getting input from people who have been impacted by this program, studying its effectiveness, and then making a decision. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Does your department have any plans to increase the bursary trust?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's certainly no increase is reflected in this budget, but as the honourable member realizes that we'll be starting our consultations and deliberations on next year's budget as soon as this one is finished, and we'll be considering a number of different initiatives and making those decisions at that time.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
You work towards increasing the bursary for out-of-province students and decreasing the differential between what out-of-province students pay and what in-province students pay.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, there's no increase beyond what the budgeted amount in this year's budget, but certainly we're working towards a $261 decrease for both Nova Scotian students attending Nova Scotia universities and out-of-province students attending Nova Scotian universities in the coming year. But those decisions will be made in due time. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few years ago, the Department of Education did a review of student financial aid, and among the recommendations was an outreach program that needed to be established through which students and families could get knowledge of the combined impact of their education and debt. And it also said that there was a need to improve the ability to navigate through the student assistance process from the initial applications to transition from students to borrowers and then throughout repayment. I'm just wondering what your government has done to address this recommendation.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
The student financial aid review, I believe, is what it was called. Okay.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The outreach program that the honourable member is talking about has been designed, but we have not committed funding to implement it at this stage.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been designed, I understand, and could we get some details of the design so we have an idea of, what's coming?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Yes, we can arrange to have that information tabled at a later date. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Another one of the recommendations from the review is that underrepresented groups would need specific programs to improve their participation in post-secondary education. And I believe these would include Mi'kmaq students and students from backgrounds that would not, from families that would not normally have considered post-secondary education. The review indicated these programs should be primarily in the form of non-repayable assistance. I'm just wondering how your government is planning to reach out to underrepresented groups to ensure there are programs in place to encourage all to attend post-secondary education.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have information on some of that. Certainly, there have been some upgrades or revisions to the Canada Student Assistance to recognize some of those marginalized populations who may have access and financial need challenges in attending universities, and so we'll track that information down and table it as well. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Alliance of Nova Scotia Student Associations is asking the government to commit to doing a full review of post-secondary education. Will the government commit to a full review?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No decision has been made about a review. Certainly in my discussions when I'm meeting with the university presidents, sometimes this topic comes up. Every program and funding mechanism in the province is viewed on a semi-regular basis. So I'm not saying that it will never happen, but usually when a review is done, there's some expectation that a lot of additional money is available to smooth out that process and to meet some of the challenges that are identified. And so I don't foresee the province being in a position to make those commitments over the next couple of years, but certainly I will be consulting with the universities and my colleagues and making decisions around that. And I certainly would welcome the input from any student organization or members of this chamber as to the advisability of moving ahead in that area. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I would like to read now and ask the Minister to comment. It's a letter from the Nova Scotia Community College President, and she says, "Colleagues, today as I write to you, I am deeply saddened. I am still working diligently to try and prevent a strike at the Nova Scotia Community College, but as of today, I have been unable to find a solution, and I am increasingly concerned. The college now finds itself in a very difficult place without a resolution in sight. The options presented to the union are now public in the news, and I am sure you are all aware of the details. I cannot talk to you about the fairness and rightness of the union's position, nor can I comment on the government's commitment to restrain public funding in order to bring Nova Scotia back to fiscal health. What I can comment on is that in the middle of these two fundamental positions, our 2,022 employees and the 26,000 students we serve stand to lose. We have already experienced a cut in our 2009-10 operating budget. Further, the province will not be providing us with additional monies to resolve our collective bargaining beyond the current options. I know also that the NSTU has made it clear that it believes deeply in its position on equity and fairness. As a result, we are now planning for the strong possibility of a strike. As you know, the union will be meeting on Thursday to set a strike date. At this time, I have no insights into that date or when it will be announced. In the meantime, we are doing what we must and readying the organization and our students for the very real possibility of a strike. If there was ever a time to remember our values of student success, accessibility, respect, service, collaboration, innovation, diversity, and public accountability, it is now. And she goes on to say, I know some of you are angry. I know some of you are afraid. I know students are worried about their education. In the days to come, I know that each one of you will continue to focus on our learners and the 26,000 lives that we change every year. And she goes on to say that she fervently hopes a strike can be averted, and if it does happen, she urges each of them to hold to what they believe. And I will provide a copy of the House with a copy of this email to table. But my question to the minister is, what is she doing to avert a strike?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I've said time after time in this chamber, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the process that is taking place. I fervently pray and hope that they do come to a settlement. I also received that email message from the president of the community college system. I'm fully aware of the impact on the community college, as well as the students and their families and the faculty and professional staff. And I just repeat that I trust that reasonable people will come back to the table and settle their differences at the table. And certainly conciliation services are offered anytime 24/7 by the Department of Labour and Workforce Development. And we all appreciate that disruption of service would be very difficult for the students and the community college. And I just, again, plead that people come back to the table and continue to talk. There's some hope that they can reach a settlement that both sides can live with. Thank you.
For Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect, going back to the table won't do any good if the government only has 1% and isn't willing to budge. So I fail to see how going back to the table is going to help. Perhaps you are right, and perhaps what we need is prayer. In the meantime, I'd like to address the growing waiting list at Nova Scotia Community College. NSCC had to turn away 2,000 fully qualified applicants in September 2008, which is enough learners to fill 67 additional classrooms at its largest metro campus. Waiting lists exist at all 13 campuses, and NSCC has advocated for a plan that serves the province in the long term.
The time has expired for the honourable member. And I would remind the honourable member to make sure she tables that information when you get it from the BlackBerry. Okay, thank you. The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and pick up sort of where I left off, Minister, a while ago, with a few more questions. I'm not sure if I'll complete the hour, and I'll hand off perhaps to my colleague. I wanted to start a little bit. I know you don't talk, from what I've heard so far, a whole lot in detail with regards to the collective bargaining process, but I'm wondering if you'd speak to the bus drivers and the custodians in the, I know in the Annapolis Valley Board, there's some issues there. There's been a long term contract, or I should say a contract that's been expired for quite a while. I think it's over 2 years now, and I'm interested in the current status of this bargaining and whether there's some bargaining going on or everything is at a stalemate right now.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we had a chance to discuss this a little earlier as well. As everyone knows, the Annapolis Valley School Board is the lead table for the provincial negotiations for CUPE. Is that the one you're discussing? Thank you. And they went back to the table, I believe, last week and have asked for conciliation, and that's probably as much detail as I'm able to give you at this stage.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. So you had mentioned earlier that you met with the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board a couple of weeks ago or so. Earlier on anyway, and interested to know what transpired at the meeting by way of what challenges did the board raise. I know, as I said earlier, we as members for the Valley area meet a couple times a year with the board, and we haven't had that yet this year, but I'd be interested in knowing what challenges they raised with you as Minister for the foreseeable future at least.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure the honourable member appreciates the fact that that session was held in camera, but what I can say is that there were some common themes among all the board meetings, and of course they're concerned about future funding, and they detailed some of their concerns around construction and the capital construction budgets. I have to say a fair amount of time, quite frankly, was spent in each board member sort of highlighting some of the things that have been achieved by the board and some of the success stories that they've had. And I found that very, very helpful in getting a sense of various schools and communities within the board. And it created a very positive atmosphere. And these meetings were held in camera, basically to develop a positive working relationship. And so I wanted them to be free to share whatever they wanted to with me and to be as frank and as they chose to. And I was able to speak in the same manner. So that's the format we used around the province, and I can't say that there was anything particularly unique or different about my meeting with the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. A couple of things on that. One, I would wonder, will there be meetings that would be public or at least not in camera with the Minister and the board in the future? Thank you. Okay, I'll take that as a yes, I guess. But on some of the challenges, every school board has challenges. There's no question about that. And we have some, I think every board probably has their successes as well. And the Valley's worked very hard over the years, and it's been a pleasure working with them in the last number of years, and I look forward to future years and continuing our good debate that we do have. And funding is and probably will always be an issue, regardless of who's in government or what year. There'll always be more needs. There are some things, though, that I find vary between boards, and I'm not sure why. And it's with regards to policy. And I'm going to come back to the school bus issue. We talked about it a little while ago. And I know that we have dealt, and I know the deputy's probably been involved in some cases with regards to school bus stops. And we have this wonderful policy that says, I believe, 1.6 kilometers, 3 stops. And I know there are a whole lot of variables. transportation gets involved and they measure sight distance and all of these things. But sometimes there are things that seem to be fairly common sense, as some parents would put it, and others, and changes could be made, and sometimes are made to the stops. Many times there's not much room for negotiation. It's just pretty much no. There's no way we can do that. Parents, of course, again, I said earlier, would love to have their child picked up right at their doorstep, and every driveway would have a bus stop, and we know that's not reasonable either, due to some of those reasons I just mentioned with regard to sight distance and lights flashing and all of those rules, and I think most people generally understand that. The 1.6 kilometers, though, I know that there were, I'm trying to think of the name of it, there was a study done with regards to walking.
Order, please. The chatter is getting a little high, and it's hard to hear the member. The honourable member for Hants West has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carrying on there, trying to pick up my train of thought. There was a study done on their walking distance, and we have some areas, you know, as I spoke of earlier as well, there's like Falmouth, there's no sidewalks, there's no street lights and such like that, and it's an issue where traffic moves right along, and we've had it assessed for a number of things, and speed being one of them, stop signs, and trying to find a better way around that particular school to make travel to and from there, again, safer for the students. And but this policy with regards to the 1.6 kilometers and the 3 stops, it may be written, but I'm not sure that it's adhered to all of the time. And is there any possibility for, there doesn't seem to be consistency across boards. And I won't get into naming boards and names, but I can tell you that we see things done in some places that we don't see them done in others. And I'm wondering, is there room to reevaluate this policy? And I'm no expert, I'll be the first to admit that, but I would be looking for people that are. And I know we have good transportation folks that Rob Sweet comes into play a lot of time out there. He's the transportation authority, or whatever the right term for him is, and does a great job analyzing all of these stops. But 1.6 kilometers, how do we get to that? And I know the deputy's been around there a while. He may have had some input on that over the years, and but I'd like to know, the 1.6 seems to be a real sticking point, and how you calculate that 1.6, depending on the day, can be done, and I'll get into that more, can be done multiple ways to make it work. So that's my question to you.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a couple of issues here. The number of bus stops within a certain distance is actually a regulation of the Utility and Review Board. And so certainly the department would not be in a position to second guess or question those regulations. However, your discussion on walking distances, you're quite right. There was a report done on student walking distance. A review was done back in 2007, and there hasn't been consensus among the boards in terms of all of the recommendations. And there also is significant, if some of them are accepted, there's significant financial impact. So there hasn't been a response from the department on this as yet. And certainly one of the issues that I raised a little earlier that boards have very strong opinions on is the recommendation that courtesy busing and courtesy stops only be approved when required for safety reasons. And there are a lot of boards who have expanded their courtesy busing. They feel that if a half-empty bus is passing stops where students are walking, that it just makes sense to pick them up. So I'm not sure where you want to go. Certainly, a number of the school boards have the right, are mandated to create individual school board policy to cover a lot of these issues that you've raised. And if many of the recommendations of this review are accepted, it might standardize some of those policies across the province, but we're not at that point yet. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that walking one is a prime example. We spent a lot of time and effort and money, I think, on such a study, but yet we seem to hand it off to the board to implement it or not, and you get this consistency that exists between boards It shouldn't be, to me, a student in Colchester County, for example, is no different than a student in Windsor when it comes to the safe transportation or the distance to walking to school and such like that. I'm just not sure why we take the time to do these things and we're not willing to implement them, because it comes back to us provincially. You can talk about the board all you want, and the board does a great job. The people working out there every day in the school bus garages and trying to supervise this whole situation are doing what they can. But yet, here we are with a gray area. There seems to be an awful lot of gray area, and it's the boards, it's the boards, it's the boards, it's the boards, and you can do what you want within the board, but the people don't seem to understand, well, okay, the board's not cooperating. We are the taxpayer, the province answers to this, it's part of the Department of Education, and they don't understand when you tell them, well, you know what, they just pass it back to the board, so they feel like they're out of luck and they have nowhere to go. And so is there any, as minister, I guess a new minister, and you're having a look at this for the first time or second time now in a few months, I realize and appreciate you've only been there a short time, but is this something that you plan to leave? You've talked an awful lot tonight that I've been here and listening to. A lot goes back to the board and it's going to stay at the board, and there doesn't seem to be, maybe you're happy with that. You're going to leave this much or all the power in the board's hands to pretty much run the schools, the school areas. There doesn't seem to be a lot of provincial impact, I guess. You're overseeing, I know that, I understand that, but really who's monitoring? The school board seems to be out there on their own, and again, they're doing what they can, but the policies are not consistent across the board, and I honestly think that the boards would like to see some consistent application, so at least they wouldn't be saying, well, we don't do it like they do it, and this discrepancy always seems to exist. And when you cross over lines like the East-West Hants or the Lunenburg County line for that matter, children are being treated differently in the way busing could take place, as one example, or walking could take place. So your comments on that, please.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the reasons that the former government delayed making a response or implementing the recommendations is that the recommendations almost have to be accepted as a package to make sense. And the boards, when they reviewed the report, were requesting more time to see how it impacted on their particular board. And it's a real catch-22 situation, I know from my own personal experience on a school board, in that when you get directives from the Department of Education, it impacts on every school board and every neighborhood school in a different way. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have the school board level of government, is because those members best understand the impact of these decisions, the considerations that need to go into making them, and you know, they're the community experts. And so some of these recommendations affecting a possible provincial standard for walking distances might work very differently in a community in HRM that has sidewalks and you know, pathways and whatever. And the honourable members already talked about the fact that many municipalities don't have sidewalks. So, and even within the school board itself, there's going to be a lot of variation. So when you have such a wide range of impacts, you've got to move more slowly. There's no sense in mandating something that boards come back and say it's impossible to implement. But that's not to say we don't take these issues very seriously, but we want to work alongside the boards and make sure that this is in the students' best interests. So while I appreciate the honourable members' concerns, we will continue to consult with the boards, and we will work towards meeting the recommendations as you know, the ones that they, as many of the package as possible to move forward on the intent of the review. And you know, certainly I'd be pleased to sit down with the honourable member and go over some of the details, so he might explain some of the particular situations in the area that he represents. And you know, also perhaps we could involve school board members to make sure that they're they're fully in line with what he's suggesting. But it's an important issue, and certainly parents raise it all the time. And we want to make walking to school as safe an exercise as possible for our students, but at the same time, how we operationalize that is very important as well. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you're correct. It's a very important issue to parents especially, and there are as many different parents as there are other ideas there are, and I think mostly the board does everything that they can with what they have to work with, and it's a bit of a common sense factor that most are looking for, and I think most of the time that does prevail. There are a few occasions when people are frustrated when nothing can be done, unfortunately, but I'll leave that. We've got a couple other things I want to cover. Educational assistance, I've heard a little bit about that as well. I know you've answered some questions on that. These folks are generally unionized employees, is that correct? Unionized employees, all the EAs, are they all the educational assistants, are they all unionized employees?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I suspect most of them are, but we'd have to research that. I can't say 100% are on the floor of the committee room. Sorry.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the reason I asked that question, Minister, is the example I'm going to give. I believe most of them are unionized members. And recently I know of a case, excuse me, I know of a case where I would think that if there were layoffs or shortages of work, I know that doesn't happen a lot in the world of EAs, but if there was one through normal bumping procedures, seniority would prevail. Would that not be the case as well in any unionized environment, especially one where regarding executive or educational assistants? Would this prevail? Would seniority always prevail in this situation?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the honourable member is right in that the majority of them would seniority would impact, but there may be some particular situations where they have specialized training that would have to be recognized through that exercise.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there was a case recently in my area where that wasn't the case, where there was an EA who was bumped for whatever reason, and from what I understand, and I'm not going to get into names here, I don't believe in that particularly, but there was a case where this lady was laid off, I guess for lack of a better term, due to shortage of work, call it what you will, but was qualified to take a position. And I'll bring that to your attention outside of this chamber, Minister, and we can talk about that individually and just see where that goes, because I know that there's an issue there. But still on the educational assistance, I'm not too sure how many times there would be a shortage of this need, unfortunately. There seems to be great need regardless of where you go around the province, and my area is no exception. We have quite a few educational assistants, and I know the work that they do through multiple ways, not only visiting the school. My sister's been an EA for many years, and certainly family and friends are those that use that service. Traveling, there are EAs that travel around from school to school and manage one or more students. Some travel on buses, is my understanding, depending on the student's needs. Is that correct?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's certainly my understanding that there are some EAs who act as bus attendants when there are special needs children requiring their support traveling by bus.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, does the funding remain constant, or does that change year to year? The needs are probably, I would think, fairly constant for a number of years. How often would that funding change, or would it change annually based on your department's budget?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, as I've mentioned several times before, the education budget reflects your government, the former government's expenditures and priorities. And I'm not sure how long, the $125 million that your government put into special education is the figure that's in this current budget. And as I've mentioned before, many boards choose to allocate more money to funding special education. So I'm not clear. There is certainly, there was in 2002 a special education review committee, and a recommendation was made for a ratio of approximately, one teacher aide to, or assistant, I should say, to approximately 104 students. And that the special education funding reflects their recommendation. And this is something that would have been implemented under the previous government. Now, a lot of boards, as I said, add additional money, and so their ratios are much lower than that amount. As with declining enrollment, which is approximately 3% a year, boards continually readjust their staffing allocations, whether it's teachers, teaching assistants, resource staff, maintenance staff, all the way through. And so that's an ongoing exercise of school boards to adjust their staffing allocations. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West, and I would remind the member he has about 12 minutes left.
12 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Time flies when you're having fun, they say. Minister, if I heard you right, you said 1 to 104. Is that the correct ratio that you used? 1 to 104?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. The $125 million specified or dedicated to special education allows for a teaching assistant, a teacher assistant for every 104 students, and that's the ratio that was suggested or recommended by the Special Education Review Committee.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't think of anywhere right off the top of my head where there's a 1 to 104 ratio going on, and maybe there is somewhere, but I guess I'm only thinking of a lot of one-on-ones is what I see in our local school system. Maybe in other boards that does exist, but I'm not familiar of in any of my schools where there's not almost one-to-one, and maybe it's because of the needs of the student are increased. Maybe we're on the wrong page here, Minister. I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak to that. Thank you.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify, that's 104 students out of the entire population, not special needs. And so the boards allocate them to support the special needs students, yes. So it's the entire student population within that board that is used in developing the ratio.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that point of clarity. Anyway, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to try to get through some of these other things. I think you mentioned earlier, maybe when my colleague was questioning you on the IB program, plus or minus, have the numbers changed this year? I believe there may be one change. I just want to clarify that at one of my local schools.
Order, please. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 13 schools that provide international baccalaureate remains the same. We've added more money to the budget for that, and there are more students taking the program. There was one school that you may be familiar with. There are 5 students remaining taking the IB program, and they are being supported in that. But because there wasn't enough interest in the new, in creating a full class, the program was dropped by the school board, but there certainly, I think, is interest in seeing if another school might want to pick it up within that same school board. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just curious, Minister, any idea, I know there are only 5, why the drop or why not the interest is there? I know it's difficult. Some students will tell you it's very difficult to go through that program, but from a department's point of view, would you comment on why that's, unfortunately, we're going to lose that at Avonview, and it's too bad. But
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just guessing, and this might be a question you want to discuss with the school board, but that school is very close to King's Edgehill, which also has an IB program, and that may be having an impact on the public school IB program. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
thank you, and I wish there was a way they could work together on that with those 5 or whatever's left, and maybe at some point that's something that can be discussed or worked on. I don't know. I know one is a private school and one isn't, but it's a shame to lose that program at Avonview. Just one more question I had on the executive, I keep wanting to say executive assistants, on educational assistants, their level of education required to do what they do, because I know oftentimes these folks are dealing with some interesting circumstances. The age groups vary, so do the needs, and so do the strengths of some of these kids that are going to school and being taught. Very able, some of them, and just wondering what kind of training do we have, and what is the required or the basic needs for someone to become an educational assistant in the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the standards were raised for educational or teaching teacher assistants a few years ago, and now high school plus 2 years post-secondary is required. Often the applicants have, for example, human resource or child care programs from the community college. I personally know a few who have been nursing aides in the past, and they've moved into to that line of work. So it's high school plus 2 years post-secondary. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that would be for new employees coming in, and I think others that I'm aware of would probably be only grade 12. I say only, that's more than enough, but would only have the grade 12 certificate at this point, and would have been in the system for some number of years now. So thank you for that. Just on a couple of other things, how much time do I have, Mr. Chair? He's not paying attention. That's okay. Minister, on the school reviews, I think our area went through a review a couple years ago. Maybe the deputy can refresh both of our memories there. Wondering what the plans are by way of our school review, if there are any changes. I know that we have a number of schools in my constituency, 8 or 9 schools there. Population is dropping in some of those areas, like it is in many areas around rural Nova Scotia, unfortunately. And just wondering what your department sees for future for the Hants West area and the schools that fall within it.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Yes, in 2006, his government did an extensive consultation and review of school review policy, And I remember actually appearing at one of the consultations for the metro area that was held at Dartmouth High School. And I have to say I was very impressed by the format of the meeting and the excellent presentation done by the two co-chairs. The two boards that have used the revised policy the most have been the Halifax Regional School Board and the South Shore Regional School Board. So representatives from those two boards, as well as other stakeholders, and including the two co-chairs of that former committee, were brought together very recently in Halifax for a focus group to discuss how the policy has been working out, and you know, whether there's any sort of minor tweakings that should be made. So in due course, if those changes are recommended, we will be moving with that. But generally, the new policy has been very well received and has worked well in a variety of situations within particularly those two school boards. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so there's no next date already chosen for review again there. We'll just continue to monitor what this board or focus group is putting forward, and student populations to be reviewed, or whatever else may indicate, you know, potential changes for the school. Because there are some who would probably believe that the right thing to do is, you know, really have a serious look at a couple schools with small numbers in them, and there would be others that would absolutely hate to see such facilities ever close, regardless of how big or small the numbers are.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I was referring to was the provincial school review policy that all boards now operate under. And just to refresh the honourable member's memory, each school board is operating under the following timeline. So by April the 1st, they should have done an initial assessment of all the schools in their board region, and they make public a list of schools that need to be reviewed, and they direct the school board staff to develop what we're calling a comprehensive school review report. Then by May 31st, the school board receives that school review report, and it would be released to the public within 2 weeks of acceptance by the board. By November the 30th, the study committee submits a response to the school board report. That's if a school is under review. It's encouraged that the school advisory council be an important or integral part of that school review process. And then the following March 31st, a final decision is made by the school board by that date as to whether or not the school will be what's the word here? Either closed or transformed in some way into another use. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know our time's running short. I did want to get a question in on adult high schools. We have an adult high school in our area, and it seems like it's always struggling. There's great need, unfortunately, for the adult high school that we have. I'm wondering what level of funding is going to be provided to help this great asset remain in our area.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before I answer that, I'd like to table some information that had been asked for earlier. In terms of the adult high schools, certainly there's no change.
Order, please. The time allotted for estimates today has expired. When we pick up on the next day, there will be 26 minutes left for the Progressive Conservative Party. I call on the Honourable the Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask that the Committee of the Whole on Supply now report back to the House on its progress and beg leave to sit again on a future day.
Order, please. Is it agreed? Motion is carried.
The Honourable Clerk.
The committee reports that it's made progress, and begs leave to sit again.
Is it agreed? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. The Speaker now recognizes the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government business for today. I wish that you now recognize the member from the official opposition to inform the House of the hours and business for tomorrow on Opposition Day.
Thank you. The Speaker would now like to recognize the Deputy House Leader for the official opposition, the member from Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to notify the House of business tomorrow on our Opposition Day, and Bill 26 and Resolution number 208 will be the order of business, and the House hours for tomorrow will be 1:30 to 5:30. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I adjourn the business of the House today.
Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned until 1:30 tomorrow.